So we are looking at the NMAT and we are looking at understanding what an adaptive test is and how do you go about writing the exam. So these are the courses that we have for NMAT. One is the online workshop 1500, which is from 17th October to 30th October. Okay, you also have the NMAT test series. Now adaptive test mocks, not many people can make adaptive mocks. So we are providing NMAT adaptive mocks for you to practice and the videos. You can go to our website to get more information or call us on this number. Coming to the paper pattern, so we have language skills, quantitative logic. This is the general paper pattern as far as the examination is concerned. So the focus is not the paper pattern, the focus is understanding the adaptive paper. So let's try to understand. So what does adaptive test means? It means that uh, basically you can solve the questions as it comes. That means you can't skip a question and come back to it later. Okay, cannot go back to questions later. So when a question comes, you have to solve it. And since NMAT has no negative marking, so it makes sense to mark all the answers that come along. So as you get a question, mark it. Get a question, mark it. So mark the question as and when it comes. So need to solve the question as it comes. Remember, no negative marking. So mark all the answers and cannot go back to questions. One more aspect about adaptive test is that if you get the questions correct, then the subsequent questions will be difficult. It basically means that you're getting correct questions, that means you're good. So they put you more difficult question later on. But if you get the questions wrong, then your subsequent questions will be easier. So you get easier questions later on. Obviously, it has consequences to it. We'll come back to consequences in the next slide, but try to understand that. That means your initial questions, if you get correct, your later questions become difficult. So your questions are not standard. It changes based on how much you get correct. The more you get correct, the more difficult your paper will be. The more you get wrong, the less easier your paper will be. That's how the paper is planned. That's called the adaptive test. That's how GMAT examination is. The GMAT is the adaptive examination, where the difficulty of question keeps on changing as in when you solve based on how many you got correct, how many you got wrong. Right? So remember this, you have to solve all the questions. You cannot go back to questions. So that means as and when you see a question, you have to mark it. You can't say, come back to it later, I can't skip. So the whole strategy for the examination will be completely different as compared to what you do for the other exams like CAT, etc. So adaptive test is a very, very different ball game in terms of preparation. So how does the scoring? That becomes very important as well when you're preparing for the exam or writing the paper. Scoring. So understand that early questions have more weightage than later questions. Okay, what does it mean? That if you get early questions correct, you have more chance of getting high marks. Which means people may curse that I'm getting difficult questions later on, but that means because you got early questions correct and because you're solving more difficult questions, the chances are that you will get higher marks. So if two people are there, okay, one person got initial questions correct and later questions wrong, but the second person got the initial questions wrong but later questions correct, the first person will get higher marks. Why? Because he has ended up solving more difficult questions in the later part, whereas the person who has got wrong has ended up solving easier questions later. Right? Because of which we normally say that the earlier question has more weightage than the later questions. So understand this weightage of the questions when you solve the paper. So you need to be a little bit more careful in the initial question so that you ensure that it gets correct. But again, you cannot spend too much time on a question because if you don't complete a paper, there could be penalty. So if you leave question unattempted, the chances of scoring high is less. You need to ensure that you complete the whole paper in a given time frame. So basically managing your paper in a given time frame becomes very important in adaptive test. You need to know what time it is, how much time is left and how many questions you can solve. Extremely important in terms of the adaptive test. So that means ensure that you solve all the questions. And since there's no negative mark, you should. Even if you have 1 minute left in the end, you can directly mark answers and move ahead. That's how you should go. Okay. Need to plan the paper so that the entire paper complete in proper time. Okay, so plan the paper accordingly. So timing for each question has to be set beforehand. They're given the paper format and you know the general pattern of the paper. So based on that, plan your paper such that you complete a paper in a given time format. That means the strategy and time distribution becomes important. Because if you spend more time on the initial questions, you will get less time on the later questions. You may not be able to complete a paper. That's one problem which is there. Second problem is getting less time for more difficult questions could severely impact you. So that means your time distribution has to be such that you should know what you're aiming for. If you plan to get initial questions correct, I mean later questions will be difficult. You need to have enough time to solve those difficult questions. So that becomes important. All this will only come if you solve enough mocks for NMAT. So ensure that you solve enough mocks for practice, because that is what will help you to understand and strategize your whole mock paper as far as the NMAT goes. So for adaptive test to understand, please ensure that you solve enough test. So we'll come up with a strategy for maybe verbal, Quant, yeah, for logic section, etc. For individual section, we'll come up with a strategy. But yes, apart from what you listen from us with regards to strategy, the best way to understand is try to experiment in the mock, analyze your paper, and then try to work on how you can best improve your scores. Right? I hope this is clear. Anyway, we provide adaptive tests, so you will have enough practice for adaptive tests. You can practice those, and that will help you practice for the NMAT examination. Thank you.